My name is Amy Anderson. I'm 32 years old and I design landscapes for a living. And the day my sister poured a $4,000 bottle of wine like it was boxed sangria was the day I stopped being afraid of disappointing my family. You'd think the worst part would be watching her drain my late mentor's 1990 Chateau Petrus into red solo cups for strangers who couldn't tell vintage from vinegar. Or maybe the $55,000 in damage to the garden I'd spent 7 years perfecting. But what hurt most was the introduction she gave me, laughing while her future mother-in-law looked on approvingly. "Oh, don't mind Amy, she's just the gardener." Just the gardener. I was standing in my own home, in the garden I'd built with my own hands, watching my sister perform generosity with my possessions for people who would never remember my name. And something inside me didn't break, it crystallized. It became perfectly, absolutely clear. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I served mine with documentation, timestamps, and a process server. But I'm getting ahead of myself because this story isn't really about wine or gardens or even the wedding that never happened. It's about the moment you realize that the people who raised you to be kind never taught you the difference between kindness and cowardice. It's about understanding that keeping the peace isn't the same as keeping your dignity. And it's about learning that sometimes the most radical act of self-love is simply sending the bill. Let me take you back to where it started, not to the bridal shower. That was just the earthquake. I need to show you the fault lines first. Before we dive into how I set myself free, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below in the comments. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Victoria was born when I was 4 years old, and I remember the exact moment I decided she was mine to protect. She was 3 days old, sleeping in her bassinet, and I climbed up on a chair to look at her. Mom was exhausted, Dad was stressed about money, and the house felt tense in that way houses do when adults are pretending everything is fine. But Victoria just slept, her little fist curled against her cheek, completely unaware that she'd arrived into chaos. "I'll take care of you," I whispered, and I meant it. Growing up, we were inseparable. I taught her to read before kindergarten, sitting on the floor of our shared bedroom with picture books spread around us like fallen leaves. When she scraped her knee learning to ride a bike, I was the one who cleaned it, who told her she was brave, who got her back on the seat. Mom was always busy, teaching classes, grading papers, managing the household with military precision. Dad worked long hours at the accounting firm, so I became Victoria's safe place. She used to call me Ames in this particular way, drawing out the vowel like it was a secret between us. When she was 8 and I was 12, she made me a birthday card covered in glitter and stickers. Inside, in her careful child handwriting, "You are the best sister in the whole world, and I will love you forever and ever and ever." I kept that card in my desk drawer for 20 years. We grew up in a modest split level in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's business. Mom cared deeply about appearances, how our lawn looked, what the neighbors thought, whether we were making something of ourselves. Dad was quieter, more withdrawn, but he shared Mom's anxiety about status. They'd both grown up poor, worked hard to reach the middle class, and lived in constant fear of sliding backward. I understood their anxiety. I just manifested it differently. I became the low-maintenance daughter, the one who didn't ask for much, who solved her own problems, who made herself small so everyone else could breathe easier. Victoria, on the other hand, bloomed. She was charming, social, effortlessly beautiful in a way that made people want to give her things. And I was proud of her, genuinely. When she got into college on a partial scholarship, I helped her write her essay. When she landed her first marketing job, I drove 3 hours to help her move into her apartment. When she called me crying after a bad breakup, I listened for 2 hours until she laughed again. I remember the day she met Marcus, her fiancé. She called me immediately, breathless with excitement. "Ames, he's perfect. He's kind and funny, and his family is so sophisticated. They have a vacation house in the San Juan Islands. Can you even imagine?" I could hear the hope in her voice, the sense that she'd finally arrived somewhere she'd always dreamed of being. "I'm so happy for you, Vic," I said. And I was. 3 months later, she called again. "Marcus proposed! Oh my God, Ames, I'm getting married!" I screamed with her. I cried happy tears. I told her I couldn't wait to stand beside her on her wedding day. "You're my person," she said, voice thick with emotion. "You've always been my person. I couldn't do any of this without you." The thing about betrayal is that it requires trust first. Deep, foundational trust. The kind built over 28 years of shared bedrooms and scraped knees and late-night conversations. The kind that makes you believe, with absolute certainty, that this person would never hurt you. Because why would they? You've been their champion since before they can remember. You've celebrated every victory, cushioned every fall, asked for nothing in return except the relationship itself. I loved my sister the way you love someone his existence feels intertwined with your own. Her joy was my joy. Her success was my success. When she called me her person, I felt seen in a way I'd never felt seen, by my parents, by friends, by anyone. So when she asked if she could host her bridal shower at my house, in the garden I'd spent 7 years cultivating, I said yes before she finished the sentence. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I know it's a lot to ask." "Vic, of course, I'd be honored. You're the best, Ames, seriously, the absolute best." I could hear her smiling through the phone, and I remember thinking, this is what love is, showing up for the people that matter, making space for their happiness. I had no idea I was making space for my own destruction. The first crack appeared 3 weeks after I agreed to host the shower. Victoria called on a Tuesday evening. I was in the garden, deadheading roses as the sun set, my phone on speaker, balanced on the potting bench. "So I've been thinking about the shower," she said, voice bright. "What if we did, like, a garden party theme? Very English countryside, very sophisticated?" "That sounds beautiful," I said, snipping a spent bloom. "What were you thinking, maybe 20 people, 30? There was a pause, just half a second too long. "Well, Marcus's mom wants to invite some of her friends, to help us get to know that side of the family better. So maybe more like 60. 60 in my garden that comfortably hosted 30 for my annual summer barbecue. "Vic, I don't know if the space. We'd hire caterers, obviously. You wouldn't have to do anything except provide the venue. Please, Ames. Diane, Marcus's mom, she's really excited about it. She keeps talking about how charming and authentic your place is." Authentic, the word people use when they mean small but acceptable. "Okay," I heard myself say. "We can make it work." "You're amazing. I'll handle everything, I promise." Over the next 2 weeks, 60 became 75, then 80, then around 90, give or take. Every time I gently pushed back, Victoria's responses became tinged with something I didn't recognize: impatience, dismissiveness. "I thought you wanted to help me, Ames." "It's just one day. It's my wedding." "Marcus's family has certain expectations. You understand, right?" I understood that I was being managed, but I told myself I was being oversensitive. Wedding planning was stressful. Victoria was under pressure. This was temporary. Then the decorator showed up. I came home from a client meeting to find a woman in my driveway unloading white folding chairs from a van. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Bridal shower delivery for Victoria Anderson? I think there's been a mistake. The shower isn't for another 2 weeks. My phone rang. Victoria. "Hey, did the chairs arrive? I had them delivered early so we could store them in your garage. Is that okay?" 20 white folding chairs were already stacked on my driveway. The decorator was looking at me expectantly. You didn't ask me first, Vic. I know, I'm sorry. It was last minute and I didn't want to bother you. You don't mind, right? It's just for 2 weeks. I minded. I minded deeply. But the chairs were already there. The decorator was waiting, and Victoria's voice had that edge again, the one that said I was being difficult about something simple. Fine, but please ask next time. Of course, love you. The chairs sat in my garage for 2 weeks. Then came the tent poles, the table linens, the boxes of centerpieces. My garage became Victoria's storage unit, piece by piece, without discussion. Mom called the week before the shower. I heard you're being a little resistant about the shower plans, she said, tone carefully neutral. Resistant? Mom, I said yes to hosting. Victoria just keeps expanding it without asking. I thought you raised me to be generous. The word hit like a slap. Selfish. The worst thing a woman could be in our family. Worse than wrong, worse than angry, worse than hurt. I'm not being selfish, Mom. I'm being used. Drama doesn't suit you, Amy. Just be supportive. That's all we're asking. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, and realized something had shifted. The family dynamic I'd navigated my entire life, the one where I made myself small so everyone else could expand, had calcified into expectation. They no longer saw my generosity as a gift. They saw it as an obligation. And when I hesitated to give more, I became the problem. The night before the shower, Victoria came by to check on things. She walked through my garden with Diane, Marcus's mother, pointing and discussing like I wasn't there. We'll put the bar here, Victoria said, gesturing to my heritage rose bed. The gift table can go next to the koi pond, Diane added. They were redesigning my garden, my work, my 7-year labor of love. Victoria, I said carefully, the roses are very delicate. If we put the bar there... It's just for one day, Ames, Victoria said, not even looking at me. They'll be fine. She called me Ames, but it didn't sound like a secret anymore. It sounded like dismissal. I should have stopped it then, set boundaries, said no. But I still believed that if I just got through this one day, things would go back to normal. I had no idea that normal was already gone. The morning of the shower, I woke at 6 to find caterers already setting up in my garden. No one had told me they'd arrived this early. No one had asked for my key. Victoria had apparently given them the garage code without mentioning it. I stood at my bedroom window in my pajamas, watching strangers rearrange my carefully planned landscape, and felt the first pulse of real anger. By 10 a.m., my garden was unrecognizable. White tents covered the rose beds. The bar, a massive mahogany monstrosity, sat directly on top of my creeping thyme. 90 chairs surrounded tables I hadn't approved, covered in linens I'd never seen. Amy, you're not even dressed. Mom appeared beside me, already perfectly put together in a lavender suit. Guests arrive in an hour. No one told me the caterers were coming at 6. Well, you knew it was today. Go get ready. And wear something nice. Diane will be judging. I retreated to my house, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I put on a simple blue dress, nice enough to be respectful, modest enough to fade into the background. I'd learned young how to make myself invisible at events that weren't really about me. The guests arrived like a tide, women in designer sundresses and expensive jewelry, air-kissing and laughing, complimenting the garden like it was a decorative backdrop Victoria had commissioned. I recognized maybe 15 people. The rest were Diane's friends, Marcus's colleagues' wives, Victoria's new social circle. I stayed busy, greeted guests, directed them to the bathroom, answered questions about the garden with brief, pleasant responses. And then Victoria arrived. She looked stunning in a white lace dress, her hair professionally styled, makeup perfect. She floated through the crowd, accepting congratulations, glowing with attention. I caught her eye and smiled. She smiled back, brief, distracted, and turned to embrace Diane. The shower progressed. Games, gift opening, speeches about love and marriage. I hovered at the edges, refilling water pitchers, clearing empty plates, playing a role I hadn't auditioned for. And then Diane stood up, champagne glass in hand. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, voice carrying across the garden, "to Victoria, who has exquisite taste. Just look at this gorgeous venue she found for us." Polite laughter, appreciative murmurs. Found, as if my garden were a rental hall. "And I must say," Diane continued, "the attention to detail is just remarkable. Victoria, you've really outdone yourself with the planning." Victoria beamed, accepting the praise like it was her due. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Then Diane turned, scanning the crowd, and her eyes landed on me. "And of course, we must thank the help. You've been so accommodating." She raised her glass vaguely in my direction. The help. Several women glanced at me, nodded politely, then turned back to their conversations. I opened my mouth to correct her, to say I was the homeowner, the gardener, Victoria's sister. But Victoria was already standing, laughing, pulling Diane toward the gift table. I told myself it was a misunderstanding, that I'd correct it later, that it didn't matter. Then Victoria called out, "Oh my God, we need to open the wine! Where did you put the good bottles, Ames?" My stomach dropped. "Vic, those bottles in the cellar aren't for the shower." But she was already moving, Diane and 3 other women following, heels clicking on my hardwood floors as they descended into my basement. I followed, panic rising. My wine cellar was my private sanctuary, 200 bottles meticulously cataloged, collected over years. Most were modest, $30, $40 bottles I'd bought for special occasions, but 12 were precious, inherited from Robert, my mentor, the landscape architect who'd taught me everything before he died 3 years ago. Victoria was already there when I reached the bottom of the stairs, scanning the racks. "This one looks expensive," Diane said, pulling out a bottle. It was the Chateau Petrus, 1990, one of only 3 bottles Robert had left me, worth $4,000. "Victoria, no, that's Robert's." "Robert won't mind," Victoria said, taking the bottle from Diane. "He's dead, Ames." The words were so casual, so dismissive, like Robert's memory, his generosity, his legacy meant nothing. "Besides," Victoria continued, already heading upstairs, "it's my wedding shower. You want people to have a good time, don't you?" I stood following them back outside, speechless, as Victoria presented the bottle like a trophy. "Look what we found, the good stuff." She uncorked it without ceremony, no decanting, no appreciation, just a festive pop and laughter as she poured it into red solo cups, for strangers who didn't know what they were drinking. I stood there watching $4,000 of irreplaceable wine disappear into plastic and felt the last thread of loyalty snap. Then someone asked Victoria who owned the house. "Oh," Victoria said, gesturing carelessly toward me, "that's just Amy. She's the gardener." Just Amy, the gardener. In my own home, in my garden I'd built, serving my wine to her guests. Diane laughed, that knowing, patronizing laugh wealthy women perfect. "Well, she's done a lovely job. You should leave her a good tip, Victoria." The women around them laughed too, polite, thoughtless laughter. Victoria didn't correct them. She looked right at me and she didn't say a word. I felt something inside me crystallize into perfect, absolute clarity. I smiled, pulled out my phone, and started recording. I'm going to stop here for a second. If this story is resonating with you at all, or if you've ever felt the pain of being misunderstood by the people who are supposed to love you most, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It really lets me know that sharing these hard stories is worth it. The party continued for 3 more hours. I moved through it like a ghost, smiling, recording discreetly, documenting everything. The trampled rose bed, the koi pond, now cloudy with spilled champagne, The greenhouse door cracked where someone had forced it open to use as a smoking area. The broken trellis, the torn shade cloth. Every few minutes, Victoria or one of her guests would venture into my cellar and emerge with another bottle. I watched 47 bottles disappear, cataloged each one on my phone, noted the retail values. By the time the last guest left at 6 p.m., my garden looked like a battlefield. Victoria was drunk, swaying slightly as Diane's driver loaded her into a black Mercedes. "Thanks for hosting, Ames," she slurred, hugging me. "You're the best, the absolute best." She smelled like my wine, my $4,000 wine. "See you at the wedding," she called, waving as the car pulled away. Mom stayed behind to help clean, or rather to supervise while I cleaned. "That went well," she said, picking up a discarded gift bag. Diane seemed impressed. I was kneeling in the dirt, trying to salvage what was left of my heritage roses. 5 bushes, irreparably damaged. 2 decades of careful cultivation. Destroyed. "Amy, you're getting dirty. The caterers will handle the cleanup tomorrow." "They're not going to fix my roses, Mom. They're just flowers. They'll grow back." Just flowers, like the garden wasn't my profession, my portfolio, my passion. "Victoria seemed happy," Mom continued. "That's what matters, right? You helped make her day special." I looked up at her, kneeling in the ruins of my garden, dirt under my nails, heartbroken, and saw no recognition in her eyes, no acknowledgement of what this had cost me. "Did you hear what Diane called me?" I asked quietly. "What?" "The help. She called me the help, and Victoria didn't correct her. She introduced me as just the gardener." Mom waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, honey, Diane didn't mean anything by it. She probably just didn't realize." "I told her. When she arrived, I introduced myself as Victoria's sister. She forgot because it didn't matter. Because I didn't matter." "You're being too sensitive." "Mom." I stood up, legs shaking. "They drank 47 bottles of my wine, including the Chateau Petrus that Robert left me. $4,000. Gone. Do you understand what that means? Victoria was just trying to be a good hostess. In my house, with my things, without asking." "Lower your voice, Amy. The neighbors." "I don't care about the neighbors." Mom's face went cold. "Clearly, you've made that obvious. Victoria tries to include you in her special day, and you turn it into drama about wine and flowers. You're jealous. That's what this is really about." The accusation hung between us like smoke. "Jealous?" "You've always been jealous of Victoria. She's successful, she's getting married, she has a future, and you're stuck here, playing in the dirt, alone." Every word was a knife, delivered with surgical precision in places I'd left unguarded because she was my mother. "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my house." "Amy, don't be ridiculous. Get out." She stared at me like I'd struck her. Then she grabbed her purse, spine rigid with offense. "When you're ready to apologize, you know where to find me." She left. I stood in my destroyed garden and felt the full weight of it settle. I'd been betrayed by my sister, insulted by her future mother-in-law, dismissed by my mother, and I'd let it happen, smiled through it, played the role they'd written for me. Just Amy, the gardener, the help. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch with my laptop, and I started documenting. I pulled up my home security footage, cameras I'd installed after a break-in scare 2 years ago. They'd captured everything. Victoria giving out my garage code, guests trampling the roses, someone breaking my greenhouse lock, the parade of people carrying wine bottles from my cellar. I made a spreadsheet, 47 bottles listed with purchase dates, values, and replacement costs. Total, $31,000. Garden damage? I photographed every destroyed plant, every broken structure. I'd kept meticulous records of my garden development, receipts, planting maps, nursery invoices. I calculated replacement costs, labor hours, professional landscaping rates. Total, $55,000. I assembled it all into a folder: evidence, timeline, documentation. And then I called my attorney. Susan picked up on the second ring. Amy, it's 10 p.m. I need to file a claim: property damage, theft, trespassing. Can you meet tomorrow? There was a pause. Then, carefully, are you sure about this? I looked at my garden, my 7-year masterpiece, now a wreck of broken stems and trampled soil. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning, Victoria called. Ames, oh my God, I feel so hungover, but wasn't yesterday amazing? Diane keeps texting me about how charming your place was. Victoria, I need you to listen to me very carefully. My voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who'd spent the night crying and emerged on the other side of something. The shower caused $55,000 in damage to my property. You and your guests took 47 bottles of wine worth $31,000. I have documentation, security footage, and receipts for everything. Silence. I'm filing an insurance claim, and if the insurance doesn't cover it, I'm filing a civil suit against you, Mom, and Diane for the full amount. Amy, what the fuck? You can't be serious. I'm also filing a police report for theft. The Chateau Petrus Amon is felony level. Are you insane? It's wine. It was a party. It was my property that you stole after destroying my garden in my home. Her voice shifted, turned sharp. I'm your sister. You called me just the gardener, in my own house, in front of strangers. That was a joke. It wasn't. You know it wasn't. I heard her breathing, rapid and angry. Mom was right. You're jealous. This is about you being bitter and alone. This is about consequences, real ones, from a real lawyer, the kind that don't care about family politics. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt clear, purposeful. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The lawsuit took 6 months. 6 months of legal meetings, depositions, and family members calling me everything from heartless to mentally unstable. Dad, who'd been mostly silent through the whole ordeal, tried to play mediator. Amy, sweetheart, is this really necessary? It's causing your mother so much stress. Dad, I was robbed in my own home by my own family. But suing Victoria right before her wedding? The wedding, the event that justified everything, excused everything, mattered more than everything. The wedding is postponed, I said quietly. Did she tell you that? Silence. Marcus's family pulled out. Diane was mortified by the lawsuit, said they couldn't align themselves with that kind of chaos. I felt no satisfaction saying it, just sadness. You ruined her wedding, Dad said, voice heavy with disappointment. No, Dad, Victoria ruined her own wedding when she stole $31,000 of wine and destroyed my property. I just refused to pretend it didn't happen. He hung up. That was 3 months in. 3 months of being the villain in their narrative, the bitter sister who couldn't let go, the ungrateful daughter who turned on family. I stopped answering their calls. Instead, I started therapy. Dr. Martinez was a grief counselor specializing in family estrangement. Our first session, I cried for 45 minutes straight. I don't understand how they don't see it, I said, tissues shredded in my hands. How they can't acknowledge what happened. They see it, Dr. Martinez said gently. They just can't afford to acknowledge it because if Victoria was wrong, then your mother was wrong for enabling her. And if your mother was wrong, then the entire family system you grew up in was wrong. that's too much to face, so they make you wrong instead. It was the first time someone had named the pattern, the shape of my entire childhood suddenly visible. I started journaling, not about the lawsuit, about everything before it. I wrote about being 4 years old, promising to take care of Victoria, about making myself small, about confusing self-sacrifice with love. I wrote, I thought if I was good enough, helpful enough, selfless enough, they would finally see me. But they never saw me. They saw a function, a role. And when I stepped out of that role, I stopped existing to them. The garden became my therapy, too. I spent weekends replanting, replacing the heritage roses with new varieties, redesigning the space entirely, not to erase what happened, but to transform it into something new, something mine in a different way. Robert had taught me that gardens are always changing, always adapting. You can't hold on to what was, he'd said, hands deep in soil. You can only tend what is and trust what's coming. I'd thought he was talking about seasons. Now I understood he was talking about life. 4 months in, the insurance settlement came through. $55,000 for property damage, covered under my homeowner's policy. The insurance company then went after Victoria, Mom, and Diane to recover costs. I didn't have to do anything. The system handled it. Victoria called, screaming, "You set your insurance company on us? We're being sued now for $55,000? I filed a claim for damage to my property. What happens after that isn't in my control. You could tell them to drop it." "No, Victoria, I can't, and I wouldn't." The wine was different. That required a civil suit. My attorney advised settling, saying family cases get ugly, Susan said. If you settle now, you can avoid court. I want court. Susan, I want it on record, what they did, what it cost. I want documentation that isn't just me saying it happened. I want it to matter. So we went to court. Victoria showed up with Mom, both of them dressed conservatively, playing the roles of wronged family members. Diane sent an attorney. I sat across from them with my evidence binders, my security footage, my receipts. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Henderson. She reviewed the documentation in silence, then looked up at Victoria. "Miss Anderson, you're seeking $31,000 in damages for the wine?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you've already received an insurance settlement for the property damage?" "Yes, Your Honor. This is solely for the stolen wine." Henderson looked back at Victoria. "Judgment for the plaintiff, $31,000, plus court costs and reasonable attorney fees. Payment plan available upon request, but the full amount must be paid within 18 months. It was over in 20 minutes. Victoria's face was white. Mom looked like she might faint. I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just completion. Outside the courthouse, Mom approached me. "I hope you're happy," she said, voice shaking. "You've destroyed this family." "No, Mom, I just stopped letting the family destroy me." I walked away. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to Victoria or Mom since the judgment. Dad sends occasional texts, "Thinking of you, hope you're well," but he never asks to meet. Never acknowledges what happened, just maintains the fiction that this is a temporary disagreement that will blow over if we all wait long enough. It won't, because I've learned something crucial in these 6 months of silence. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of self-respect. For 32 years, I built my identity around being the person who helped, who supported, who sacrificed. I thought that made me good, loving, worthy. But goodness without boundaries isn't goodness. It's self-abandonment. The garden is thriving now. Different, but thriving. I've taken on new clients, people who appreciate my work, who respect my expertise, who pay my invoices without complaint. Last month, I won a local landscaping award. The prize included a feature in a regional magazine. I framed it, not out of pride, but as a reminder. I was never just the gardener. I am a skilled professional who built something beautiful, and that beauty has value. I have value. Do I miss Victoria? I miss who I thought she was. The sister who called me her person, who promised to love me forever and ever and ever. But that sister, if she ever truly existed, is gone. Or maybe she was always a story I told myself to make sense of the role I'd been given. Do I regret the lawsuit? No, not for a second, because it taught me that I deserve protection, even from family, especially from family. The $31,000 Victoria pays me monthly, I put it into a fund for young landscape designers who need mentorship and support. I call it the Robert Stevens Fund. He would have liked that. My therapist asked me recently what I'd learned from all of this. I learned, I said slowly, that love isn't measured in what you're willing to lose. It's measured in what you're willing to protect. She smiled. And what are you protecting now? Myself. Finally. I used to believe silence was safety, that keeping the peace was the same as keeping your dignity, that family meant accepting any treatment because blood mattered more than boundaries. Now I know better. Some gardens need to burn before they can bloom again. Mine did, and I'm blooming. This was another story from Revenge Room, where we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? How did you rebuild trust? What's one thing you learned about yourself after a betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Please don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next transformation.